Like Coleman has 2 penitentiaries. Then you have mediums. The bulk of the system, I think, is basically mediums. Because that's basically what you think of as like a real prison.
Yeah.
And then you have lows. And then you have camps. Camps have no fences, typically. There's a few that have fences, but even those fences, you can jump them. Basically, you'll have like 200 people there, 150 guys. You'll have like 2 guards. And they sit in a room. Because you're basically on out custody.
Is that where you can do work release programs?
Right.
Okay.
You could, right, that sort of thing.
Okay.
So there's just, the camps are just outrageous. I mean, guys are like jumping the fence, going and getting McDonald's, coming back. Guys are jumping the fence, going and robbing 7-Elevens and coming back. I mean, there was in Atlanta, these guys are like, they're all drunk all the time. It's insane. They all have cell phones. They're all taking pills, and it's outrageous.
Wow.
But they were saying, look, I always assumed at 10 years I could have gone to a camp because I came in with camp points. So I was thinking to myself, I'll go to a camp and I'll leave. So basically, by the time I kind of started putting that together, I've been locked up. I had like 10 years to go. In my mind, I was like, you got 10 years. You really had like 20-something years to go. But I was just thought, man, I'll just go to a camp and leave. Because, I mean, that's just, you're trying to say anything to get yourself through it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's that whole hope.
It's that little light at the end of the tunnel.
Right. Anyway, I go to the low. I'm there, and I decide I'm going to write a memoir. So I end up writing a memoir. And while I wrote that memoir, I read a bunch of books on, not a bunch, I read like 2 books on how to write memoirs. I read a book on, I read like, it was like nonfiction writing for dummies or something, which is actually a great book. So I read these books, and what's funny is that, you really have to kind of learn about yourself. Does that make sense? Like I got locked up, and initially when I got locked up, it was everybody else's fault. And you start reading about yourself and about memoirs and about what helped shape you, who you were, how did you get here? You have to do some internal, thinking about yourself, and you start to realize, I realized kind of like, I put me here. Nobody else did. I made all those decisions. I'm just a douchebag.
Right.
I fucked up. I've made some selfish decision. I'm extremely narcissistic. I'm extremely self-centered.
Yeah.
I tend to dominate conversations. It's difficult for me to take interest in other people. I mean, I have some major fucking problems. I'm extremely entertaining.
Well, that's huge to be able to recognize that. I mean, that's a huge, I mean.
But I'm saying that's what's funny is I'm in prison reading this, and I'm like.
And you're realizing all of it.
Yeah, I'm going, that's me. Where I would have never said that before. Had someone actually accused me of being a narcissist or arrogant or anything, I'd be like, that's bullshit. You don't know me. You don't.
Right.
No, you know what? You do know me. Because you start to see yourself as you really are. And so, it's humbling, to realize that.
Yeah.
And then you start to see it in other people, and see yourself in other people. Anyway, I end up writing a memoir. While I'm writing that memoir, a guy named Ephraim Deveroli comes on the compound. Deveroli was in Rolling Stone magazine. He and another guy named Packows had sold military weapons and ammunition to the U.S. government. And he'd ended up selling a bunch of Chinese ammunition, which was embargoed, and he got in trouble. Rolling Stone did a big spread on him by a guy named Guy Lawson. So I read the article, and somebody told me, hey, you know that article the other day in Rolling Stone about the gun kid? And I was like, yeah. They go, that's him right there. I was like, fuck. So later on, I went up to him and talked to him and said, hey, man, my name's Matt Cox. You ought to think about I read that article on you. You ought to think about writing a memoir. And he was like, oh, I couldn't write a memoir. I'm like ADHD and I'm bipolar. He said, I couldn't pay attention long enough. He said, I couldn't do that. I mean, he was real dismissive. Yeah. I said, well, if you need any help, I'd be willing to write an outline for you or work with you on an outline. You could probably send it to a ghostwriter on the street and they could ghostwrite it for you. You still have plenty of money, obviously. And he's like, yeah, I'll think about it. So anyway, a few months go by, and eventually after several months, I basically was finishing up mine. I ended up getting a literary agent. Mm-hmm. And so Deveroli comes to me and he says, hey, I definitely want to do it, that sort of thing. So we end up doing this, right? I ended up writing this book for him. And so then he ends up, I'm not going to get all into it. It's too convoluted.
It's a whole nother story.
It's a whole nother story. He ends up leaving with the memoir. Gives me a big bear hug, tells me I know him more than anybody in the world.
That you completed for him.
Of course. Right. Well, I wrote the whole thing.
Right. How long did it take you to write it?
about 3 months.
Okay.
Which is really, really quick. But God, he had all of his evidence. And his sister was doing all research for me. So if I was like, hey, listen, he told me about this, or I'd send her an email and say, he told me about one time this happened or this. Do you remember when this plane blew up? And can you look up some articles? Bam, she'd send me all these articles. Yeah.
Who was that again?
His sister.
His sister, okay.
Was doing research for me. And he had like 10
He just put you in contact with all these people that he worked with and his family.
Right. And he had like 10 different boxes of evidence.
Oh, wow.
Under his bed and in the lockers and everything. So if I said, hey.
In there with him?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, he's fighting his case.
Okay.
So, if I said, hey, do you have your transcripts from that? Of course, I'll bring them to you tomorrow. He'd show up with stacks of transcripts I had to read and pull out stuff. And so I ended up writing this book. He leaves with the book. Warner Brothers, according to his lawsuit, Warner Brothers ends up getting a hold of the manuscript.
Okay.
And they use his manuscript and this guy Guy Lawson, the article that in Rolling Stone magazine, they'd bought the rights to the article, and they used the article plus the book that I wrote, the manuscript, to supposedly write the movie War Dogs.
Directed by Todd Phillips.
Right, and with Jonah Hill plays Deveroli.
Right.
And it's funny because, anyway, he's a scoundrel. He plays a scoundrel. He really, Jonah Hill did a great job. So that movie gets made, and then
Did he really? Is it pretty accurate?
It's accurate. Only I think that Deveroli is more cunning, more vicious.
Okay.
So
how on point is the movie to like the manuscript you wrote? Did they veer off?
no,
Or did they leave
yeah,
a lot
they
out?
definitely veered off.
Okay.
What they did was they took scenes that were definitely scenes from my manuscript, but they swapped characters. Like they changed them, they altered them certain ways. Things that were certainly not in any of the other books. They're definitely taken from my manuscript. But then instead of having Deveroli, like in the movie, Pacquiao's girlfriend is against the war. And there's all these arguments between Pacquiao and his girlfriend about the war. She doesn't like the war. She doesn't like him selling weapons. So she's against it. In real life, that was Deveroli. They just swapped the characters.
Oh.
So Pacquiao's didn't have this great apartment. That was Deveroli. There's all these things that Deveroli. So they just swapped them because they had Pacquiao's life rights, not Deveroli's. So they just swapped the two.
Wow.
But anyway, so
what were you doing when you found out this movie came out?
oh, I'm still in prison. Deveroli stopped talking to me. My literary agent stopped talking to me.
So what,
the two of them are now suing. Were then suing Warner Brothers.
Who?
Deveroli and my literary agent. They end
Okay.
up teaming up and suing Warner Brothers. And nobody's talking to me. Nobody's telling me anything. I've never gotten. They're not sending me money. They're not answering calls. I'm writing letters. That, like I said, that's a whole nother story. The point is I sue them, they sue me, they sue Warner. Warner, they end up. There's all these things. I've signed a confidentiality agreement, so I don't want to say what actually I know happened. But the bottom line is
this story on your website?
Part of the story.
The memoir's not on your website.
No.
Okay.
No. Actually, the memoir is on the website. I think you can buy the memoir if you go there. Part of the story is, yes, the story about me meeting him and writing the book.
Okay.
And then him getting out and him filing suit against Warner Brothers and the whole that part is there, but then I think I end it with me filing a lawsuit, and then I don't say anything else. Because since then things have happened. We've had mediations. We've had several things happen.
So that's currently going on.
Going on right
Okay.
now. So, and look, if I told you about some of the stuff that's happened.
Where's Deveroli right now?
Oh, he's in Miami. I saw him about a month or so ago. I went down for the deposition, and that's a whole nother story, man. It's insane. So, matter of fact, my lawyer might actually be like, "What the hell are you doing? Don't talk about that." But I don't think I've said anything that's just not already in public record. Right. But there's other stuff. Anyway, so we're still going back and forth. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so I write his. Well, I'm writing now. So now I've decided I want to write. I remember Deveroli had read my manuscript, my memoir, and he said he wanted me to write the story. He goes, "That's the best thing I've ever read." But in retrospect, later I found out he'd actually only read like
Dr. Seuss.
Yeah, he never really read anything. So I was like, okay, well, It's not really a compliment.
Cat in the Hat.
You've read like 3 books your whole life.